Welcome back to Inside City Hall. A week ago, the Supreme Court upheld President Obama's controversial health care law. That decision prompted Republican congressional leaders to schedule a vote, it's going to take place next week, to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Joining me now to discuss the health care vote and more is Republican Congressman Michael Grimm, who represents parts of Bay Ridge and Gravesend and Bensonhurst and Dyker Heights, as well as all of Staten Island. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Great to see you.
Were you as surprised as everyone else was when the Supreme Court decision came down?
Yes, I was. One, I was disappointed overall with the decision, but Chief Justice Roberts, which really made the decision, was very surprising. The tax side of this, you know, I felt pretty comfortable that it was unconstitutional under the Commerce Clause. Also, it would be unconstitutional under the Necessary and Proper Clause, which is what the court held, but they upheld it under the Tax Clause. What I was most surprised about, though, is that the president campaigned that it wasn't a tax. And if you go back to the debates before I was a member of Congress, the Democratic Party, Republicans put it out there that it was a tax, and they debated very, very ambitiously on the floor and robustly that it was not a tax, but yet they argued to the Supreme Court as their third reason to uphold it, that it was in fact a tax, and therefore it was constitutional under the taxing powers of the Congress. So that was very surprising and also very disappointing.
Well, tell me about how this plays out in your district and across New York State. I mean, this tax or penalty, whatever you want to call it, is on the 1 to 2 to maybe 3% of Americans who don't have insurance and would otherwise maybe be what they call free riders, right? So
well, I don't think that's the way it's going to play out at all. I think that's actually the complete opposite of what's going to happen. Look, this is a massive law, massive, that is going to impact every small business and the economy as a whole. And CBO is already projecting millions upon billions of dollars of new taxes. Where do you think that's going to come from? 1 or 2% of the population? Absolutely not. It's going to hurt middle-class Americans the most, which is who always gets affected. I grew up in a very middle-class family. My dad worked 3 jobs. It was always the middle class that got hit, and that's exactly what's going to get hit here. And more importantly, though, at a time where all of us need to be worried about this economy. We have to get people back to work. That's my #1 priority. And the economy is very fragile right now. This health care law, I believe, is going to hurt that economy. The tax on the middle class and everyone is going to bear the burden.
But let's not make the mistake, as so often happens with health care, of talking about dollars instead of talking about people. I mean, the premise of this, and you know, you're elected in 2010 in part in reaction, as one of the Tea Party candidates in reaction to this, because there was a lot of discontent about it. But the original idea was supposed to be that the millions of Americans who don't have health insurance, I think it was 1.4 million in New York State, that we're going to either pay very expensive care for them in the hospitals and in emergency rooms, the rest of us, you know, or we're going to figure out a way to take care of them. And the fact that you can't take care of them for free is surely not a surprise, right?
No, and the premise is correct. But here's the problem. First of all, we have the best healthcare system in the world. We shouldn't destroy what we have to make it better. I agree, and I think everyone agrees, that it's not just about repeal. It's about what are we going to replace it with, because we do have to have a better healthcare system. But it has to be a healthcare system that does the first and fundamental thing of reducing the cost of healthcare. That's what's crippling the United States now, is that every year the cost of healthcare is going up astronomically. We have to be able to stop that.
What's the problem in New York and in your district? Is the problem that the cost is too high, or is the problem that there are 1.4 million New Yorkers who don't have insurance?
Oh, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It's specifically in my district, you look at Staten Island, we don't have a public hospital, first of all. So our 2 hospital systems are the safety net. When you look at the Affordable Care Act, what is it going to do? It cuts $11 billion from New York City hospitals. So that right off the bat is a big problem that I have with the Affordable Care Act. The other thing is it takes $500 billion away from Medicare Advantage. I have a lot of seniors in my district. These are the people that built this country. Now that they need that safety net, they should have it. We shouldn't be taking money away from seniors. So $500 billion away from Medicare Advantage, that means less doctors will be taking Medicare. That's the reality. So you explain to me, because no one has been able to explain this. If we're going to add almost 30% more people to the rolls of healthcare, but we're not adding doctors, and many more doctors, because of the way this bill is written, are dropping out of Medicare, that can only lead to rationing and a reduction in the quality of our care. That is not the right way to go. The whole idea of this board, this IPAB, it's 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, in my opinion, is the worst thing we can do. The one thing that separates our healthcare system from just about everyone else in the world is that it was always patient-based. And no matter what reforms we need, we should never get away from patient-based health care. And when we put bureaucracy in the middle, I think that's a problem.
Wait a minute. You're kidding, right?
No, not at all. I'm dead serious.
We've had patient, when as under the current system, you've got to talk to an insurance professional to get anything done. Anybody who's ever tried to get their parents or their kids or anybody else
and most
any
doctors
kind of health
complain
care,
about that.
You call that patient-based?
It's still patient-based. The decisions are still made between the doctor and the patient. There is not a bureaucracy in Washington, bureaucrats in Washington
the bureaucracy
that
is at Empire Blue Cross or some other unelected, unaccountable place, right?
Well, I wouldn't say they're completely unaccountable or unerected. I mean, I'm a perfect example. When I started my first small business, I had to go out and get my own health insurance. And I looked around to see who had the best plans that fit my needs. And I like that flexibility. What I think we should be doing is holding insurance companies more accountable, but also giving them more flexibility. And you hold them accountable by bringing in more competition. We should be able to go across state lines. We should allow healthcare companies to have the flexibility of offering different types of plans instead of what the state mandates they must have.
And so I guess I want to talk to you about some other stuff. So you think that the best way to get to where you want to be with going across state lines and some other better fixes is to repeal this root and branch?
I think we repeal this and take a step-by-step pragmatic approach that is patient-based and controls the cost of health care. And at the end, we should end up with a product that means better care, more access, but not at the cost of tearing down everything we have now.
Is the repeal vote that you're going to make, you're intending to cast next week, I take it, along with the rest of your conference? I mean, for the parts of the bill that almost everybody seemed to like not denying care because of pre-existing conditions, and doing things like allowing people up to 26 years old to stay on their parents. I mean, to repeal everything, to get rid of all of that, will put millions of people in a severe health emergency.
Well, I think it's already putting millions and millions of people in a situation where they're not going to be able to keep the health care they want. Health care is getting so expensive that a lot of employers are not going to offer it anymore. They'll just pay the penalty. So I think the outcome is worse. If we do not repeal it, I think it will crush our economy. We'll end up at less jobs and less people having the access to the care that they want. So I think we repeal it. Yes, there are some good premises in this bill that we should then build on and do a step-by-step approach. Some of the things you mentioned, I agree with. But it's easy to do that in a small bill, not 2,700 pages that no one understands, not something we have to pass to find out what's in it. So I think there's a much easier way, a step-by-step approach that makes sense, that we can agree on, and start with where we agree. Where Democrats and Republicans agree, that should be the first thing we do. We can do that in a simple 20, 30-page bill that everyone can read and understand, and we don't have to completely change our health care system and put seniors at risk.
Okay, we'll see what happens next week. I don't want to let you get out of here without talking about the censure vote, the contempt vote against the sitting U.S. Attorney General, guy you used to work for.
Yes.
Or I should say the Department of Justice that you used to work for.
Absolutely.
Well, how did you vote on that, first of all?
I voted for the contempt.
And why was that?
Because I think at the end of the day, the checks and balances, regardless of Republican, Democrat, politics should never play into that. But it is incumbent upon each branch of government to hold the other accountable. Without those checks and balances, we lose the entire framework of what makes this country great. So
when the Department of Justice, when the Attorney General says, you've asked for, I've given you 7,000 documents pursuant to this botched gun investigation, you're saying that's not good enough? He needs to do more?
I think that from the very beginning, when this first came out, they were less than candid, let's just say, I'll be nice. And they were less than candid from the beginning. And I think a lot of the public perception, or the public lost a little bit of confidence. That needs to be instilled. Again, there should be no politics in this. I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican in office. If the Congress Oversight and Investigative Committee doesn't do its job, then we're losing something that's fundamental to the rights of the American people, all, Republican, Independent, Democrat alike. No president, no administration should ever be held unaccountable. And when you, especially in a situation where you lost a federal agent, you know, I'm a former federal agent, as you mentioned. Sure. He lost his life. That family deserves answers. And the way it was handled from the very beginning just did not seem right. A lot of people felt that it took too long for the Attorney General to come out and explain certain things, and because of that, you know, I think a lot of people lost some faith, and it's this committee's job to make sure that everyone is accountable, just as it is the other branches.
If the idea was to get politics out of the situation, it doesn't look like that worked. I mean, you had a group of members, mostly from the other party, walk out during the vote. You had essentially a party line vote. Nearly every member of the New York delegation, in fact, voted against, and many walked out. So it doesn't look like we took politics out of the equation.
Right, but again, I think that the role of each branch of government is to hold the other branches accountable. If we don't do that, then, you know, maybe next time we have a Republican president, and if he does something wrong, then you know what? He needs to be held accountable.
But look, there were 2 Republican presidents. I mean, you know, John Mitchell was U.S. attorney during Watergate. He wasn't held in contempt, and Alberto Gonzales had a scandal in the Bush administration.
And just because they weren't doesn't mean that maybe they shouldn't have been. I don't know enough about those cases, but I will tell you this: that's the point. The point is, no one should get a pass. When you allow one branch to get too powerful, you're jeopardizing the entire integrity of the system.
Yeah, but now the contempt citation now goes to the Department of Justice, to the Attorney General himself, who presumably is not going to investigate himself, I hope.
Well, that's the question. You know, the rumors that I'm hearing in Washington, D.C. is that the FBI is no longer involved in that case and that they were asked to leave. And that Attorney General Holder's quote-unquote closest friend is now in charge of the investigation. You know, those are the types of things. Now, I haven't confirmed that, but that's what we're hearing. A lot of my colleagues are talking about on Capitol Hill. That would be a situation that would be untenable and should not be allowed. And if the Oversight and Investigative Committee of Congress doesn't do it, then who is going to look at this? Does anyone in America want any administration, Republican, Democrat, to be unvetted, to not have some controls in place? That's not what the Founding Fathers envisioned. That's not what the Constitution demands.
We'll eagerly await whatever reports come out of this. And thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you.
We'll talk again real soon. We're going to take a short break.